Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. Welcome to the Burke County Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting for Tuesday, November the 2nd, 2021 at 3 p.m. Madam Clerk, all commissioners are present. I would remind you at this time to please silence your mobile devices. If you've got telephones and others, please take care of that. Let me thank you for taking care of COVID-19 protocol, and want to encourage our citizens to continue to be vaccinated and boosted and all that good stuff as we continue down the trail. All right, gentlemen, you've had the agenda for this meeting. I want to note that we had asked you to add one item to the consent agenda for the planning board. With that addition, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner.
As amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those no. It's all of us, Madam Clerk. I have several items for presentation this afternoon. First one coming from Tourism Development, and we'll recognize Ed Phillips, our director for that. Afternoon, Ed.
Good afternoon. Beautiful Burke County day outside. We've got visitors rolling in every day, all exits on I-40 and in between. So I come before you today to talk about the end of our last fiscal year and our last quarter as well. Go over the fiscal year first. We finished really well financially. During the pandemic, we did cut back on some expenses, marketing and other things that we normally would do during the course of a normal fiscal year. We also received grants and PPP loan that helped us out tremendously, and we did qualify for the PPP because we had more than a 25% reduction in revenue in the second quarter of 2020. So we did qualify for that. So we ended the year really well, to the good of $125,554. The TDA is in an excellent financial position at this time, and we were really happy to save money last year, apply for grants, and be awarded those grants that helped us stay in the front of folks in our marketing area who came to Burke County. As you know, we had a lot of folks coming to the county last year because of our outdoors, wide open spaces, state parks, and national forest. So for the first, my report, the first part of that was the end of the fiscal year. The second part of my report is for the first quarter, July through September. And you'll see on here that we actually have only collected $87,356 in occupancy tax because we're always 2 months behind in getting that. So we really don't have a good, clear picture of our revenue until we get pretty much into the middle of our fiscal year. So it did show a loss of $27,000 for the first quarter, but that's inconsequential over the year budget. We did go back. Our original budget for the last fiscal year was $600,000 in revenue. We actually made $598,000. So even during the pandemic and with the addition of the downtown Fairfield Inn and Suites, we were able to, we just missed it by less than $1,700 for the whole fiscal year of actual occupancy tax revenue. So we've gone back to our $600,000 budget that we had previously, and quite honestly, we're way ahead of that from what we've seen early returns from hotel business here. There's a lot of factors now affecting tourism in Burke County. Construction of the School of Science and Math, recruitment of staff, faculty and staff at the School of Science and Math, weddings and other events held at our venues in Burke County. Some of them are booked every weekend. We were up at Hidden Hill for a TDA board retreat in September. They're booked 2 and 3 weddings a week all the way through the end of 2022. So those types of events are really strong now in Burke County and are coming back, thank goodness. So I'll entertain any questions on either the end of the year or the first quarter.
All right, thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed on his reports? Just a curiosity, Ed, what kind of revenue, I know the venues, of course, bring in overnight guests, but are there any other revenues that we would anticipate from those type venues?
So yeah, the caterers, actually quite a few restaurants and catering companies in Burke County provide meals and snacks and whatever at those venues during those events. And so those are actually additional revenues other than hotels. Transportation, so we utilize our trolley for a lot of transportation at some of these events. And there's other transportation now in the county that's also providing services to those events. But yeah, that's been, and a lot of the hotels, I mean, they're doing well on these events. If you have a wedding now on Sunday afternoon, those people are staying over on Sunday night. And Sunday used to be a real soft night in the hotel world, and it's not so much anymore. So, and these events are going on year round, which also weddings and the special events used to be like April through October, and they're booked every weekend now. So that's really, really strong for them.
All right, thank you very much. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you, Ed.
One other item we have on here, I think it's under the same, is the bylaws. Is that correct, Kay? Am I to deal with this at this point, or?
That's under the consent agenda, and that would be up to the board.
Okay.
Let's just wait. We don't have that right in front of us, Ed, if you don't mind. We'll get
Okay.
there shortly, maybe. Item number 2, presentation. This comes from Western Piedmont Community College. Presentation of economic value. Dr. Welch, good to see you.
And hope everybody's having a great week. Really appreciate the support that we've gotten at Western Piedmont from our county. And I've now been in the county a little over 15 months and really settling in, excited. But one of the things that we did over the past year as I came in learning about the community and the college was we brought in an outside consultant to do an economic impact study to look at our alumni base and also to look at our program demand gap analysis. And so wanted to give the county commission a report on that and the information that we've received that helps look at how we're spending money and what the return on is for the college. And you'll have in your materials an infographic there, be able to provide additional information. But a couple of key things that I wanted to point out that I think was important is the operations at Western Piedmont, what we do supports 1 out of every 15 jobs in the county. That is a really big support for what we do. The spending, if you look there from the alumni impacts, about $100 million, which is World Series time, so that's about like hosting the World Series in Burke County is an impact that you have coming in from the college. And then as you look down, things that I think are really important, for every dollar invested in the college, you can see an impact that comes back. And if you look far to the right there, bottom right, you'll see that we have an impact social, $6.40 for every dollar that comes through the college. And what that is looking at is the impact of education, the fact that as more students get an education, they're less likely to commit crimes, they're less likely to have need for county services that you have for poor and folks out there like that, so they put less of an impact there. So we have a significant impact in the county, and this report really gives back on that, the impact that we have from Western Piedmont Community College. So really a big deal, and I wanted to be able to give the county commission a report back on that from Western Piedmont, really thinking about the support that you provide and that the county and our citizens provide to us and being good stewards of that. Any questions that you've got, I'm happy to answer those, but wanted to give you a brief look at what we've got there.
All right, thank you, Dr. Welch. Any questions?
Not a question, Mr. Chairman, but I did want to make note for those people who are finishing high school and hadn't signed up yet at Western Piedmont Community College. The difference in the salary of a high school graduate and a doctorate degree almost doubles per year in their life. That's a pretty good investment. So,
It's absolutely great return on investment. I was touring a high school this week and told those students that they need to look at a return on investment. Community college is a great return on investment. And since you brought it up, I will mention that we are in spring registration right now, signing students up to be here in spring. So pass the word. We are going to have on November 4th or 5th, right in there, we've got a Saturday registration. We'll be open from 8:30 to 2. Again, looking to serve folks in our county and our region. So really good on return on investment.
we wish you well. We hope you fill your classes up.
Working hard on it.
Thank you, Dr. Welch. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3 comes from Finance, presentation of fiscal year 2021 audit. This will be presented by our Deputy County Manager, Finance Director, Margaret Pierce. Afternoon, Margaret.
These are hot off the press. We got them yesterday evening. The representatives from Loudermilk Church are not able to be here today. They had their peer review get scheduled, unfortunately, today, so they are doing their study with the audit firm that came in to review their work each year. So they will be here on the 16th to answer any questions and provide an actual presentation for you. So at this point, you haven't really had time to look at it since we just got it yesterday. It has been submitted to the LGC. It has not been fully reviewed by them yet, but we are hopeful for no changes. And they can answer any of your questions when they get here on the 16th.
All right, any questions for Margaret? All right, thank you, Margaret. We'll look forward to seeing those folks at our regular meeting, and without objection, this item will remain on our agenda. Brings us to public hearings. We have a couple of scheduled public hearings this month. First one comes from BDI, and Alan Wood, our BDI president and CEO, will tell us about Project Umbrella. Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to be here for another building reuse grant. It's always a good time when these come up. This is an existing industry. It has been through the funders forum, so they have pre-approved. Now, this still has to go through the Rural Infrastructure Authority for final approval, but the amount that it has been submitted for is $240,000, creation of 30 new jobs, and the City of Morganton is the applicant on this, so we would be asking the county to provide 1/2 of the 5% match of $12,000 or $6,000 for this project. This is an existing industry. As I said, they're doing an internal expansion. They will exceed the county average wage of $37,610, and the company does provide at least 1/2 of the cost of health care. We think this is a good expansion. We've been working with this client off and on for multiple years as they've tried to move forward to this. COVID, of course, had some impact on them and delayed it, but they are now ready to go. And I think it would be a good project for Burke County.
All right, thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan on this matter? Seeing here none, this item will remain on our public hearing agenda. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Item number 2 comes from Community Development, zoning map amendment to 2021-11 in public hearing. This will be presented by Alan Glines, our planning director. Evening, Alan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, commissioners. We received an application for rezoning. Take this off. It's about a 32-acre portion of a 54-acre tract located just off of Jamestown Road. The property is the ask is to take it from industrial to R3, which is what the other portion of the tract already is, and is in line with some of those neighboring parcels nearby. Could you advance the slides, please? Where are we at here? Okay. A number of residential uses are nearby to the west. This is actually existing land use, and property's vacant. The tracts south and west are residentially used, so that's the neighborhood kind of component of this. Next slide, please. Mostly wooded site. Next slide, please. And we show the future land use, which is focused on kind of moderate growth in that area. And the next slide, please. The current zoning is the area outlined in red, And interestingly enough, the south end of that track is the industrial track. I imagine they were preparing or proposing to attach to that other track to the upper right. But actually, it's not the same track at all. So the request would be to take this lower portion and make that R3, which allows a variety of residential uses, and it appears to be the focus and intent of that area going forward. So staff's supportive of that request, and the planning board also recommended that in favor. And I can answer any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I just had one. According to the presentation, they want to rezone 24 acres. My question was, why did they not rezone the entire 61 acres?
Well, the track owned by Mrs. Bird is the area outlined in red, so it's only a
Okay.
portion of that. The other track is someone else's land.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's not the same ownership on the upper right.
I misunderstood that. Thank you. You got it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, this item will remain on our public hearing schedule. Thank you, Alan. Brings us to consent agenda, item number 5. The first item on the consent agenda comes from Burke County Public Schools. Presentation of financial data. This will be presented by Keith Lawson, the school's financial officer. Afternoon, Keith.
Good afternoon, County Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to appear before you today to present our first quarter financial results for Burke County Public Schools. You all are familiar with the schedule that's in your packet. I'll start out with the very first line, which is state. That is our state funding. As you can see, our previous year was $84.7 million approximately. Our current forecast is 85.5. As you all are well aware, we still have no state budget at this time. So we're keeping the state budget again flat until we hear otherwise, as has been the case for the last few years. There is a slight increase in the numbers that you'll see there, but that is due to the fact that we had just a small amount of COVID or ESSER, which is elementary and secondary schools, emergency relief funds, that flowed through state. So that's why you see the annual increase there. As far as the first quarter results, you can see that our spending is negative 0.7% of revenue, so it's flat at this time. The next line, federal, highlighted in just a slightly different color. You can see in September year-to-date, last year was 1.6 million versus this year of 7.4. That again, that substantial increase is our emergency relief funding, which is being used for a lot of varied causes. We hired 11 additional school nurses. That's an expense that we realize is occurring or recurring, and this is non-recurring funds. We do have a longer range plan to address that issue specifically. Otherwise, the investment has been in air quality improvement projects. We have approximately $18 million of air quality improvement projects that have been either completed, in process, or are planned all the way through September of 2024. Obviously, when it comes to air quality improvement, given the COVID situation, we wish it could all be done at once and all be completed, but we, as you see on the news, and I'm sure experience it yourself, our vendors have supply chain issues of their own, so we're waiting on equipment for many of those projects that we don't anticipate receiving actually until all the way into next summer. The next categories that you see consist of funding from you, the County Commission, of local school nurses, charter schools, fines, and forfeitures. We appreciate you funding us at the same rate as the previous year, and as you can see, we're relatively flat in the local categories. Next is receivables. Receivables is it's a little bit misleading to have it on the revenue sheet, but that's the way it's classified. But that is actually what the schools owe back to Burke County Public Schools as an entity. And it's actually credit to expenses rather than revenues, but still, for audit purposes, it is stated this way. Next is our special revenues. You can see that current year's forecast to previous is significantly less, and that's just simply due to the impact that operations have resumed as normal, or as normal as they can be in comparison to previous years in pre-COVID. So we do anticipate more of those programs ramping back up that is the reason for that increase specifically. Next slide, more specific to the local. As you can see under the unaudited column, which is 2021, specifically the revenues over or under, I had estimated a contribution last year to fund balance of $493,527. We actually came in, our audit's not, hasn't come off the press yet, but our contribution to fund balance was actually $509,000. Coming on across to the budget for this year, it's $16.3 million in comparison to $16.34 last year. First quarter results, as you can see, indicated, and this is tracking just a little better than what we were through the first quarter of last year. So as a result of that, I would anticipate at this time that our contribution to fund balance again this year will be somewhere in the $500,000 mark. And I would like to make a point in saying that, although we're contributing to fund balance, there's a couple of primary reasons, there's a few reasons actually, that's occurring. We've purchased a lot of specialized custodial and cleaning supplies from ARP Funds, thus relieving our own local custodial supply budget. Our maintenance department is concentrating on a lot of ESSER projects, thus their spending from local has curtailed as they manage and administer ESSER projects. So that being said, the fact that we haven't asked the county for an increase previous 2 years, don't anticipate asking for an increase next year or even the year after. Things are going up. We all know that. Inflation, 5.4% last month, the highest since 2008. So while we're relieving our own local budget using the ESSER funds, our needs when we return to normal operations locally will be compounded by those years and that inflation. So our increase that we will anticipate asking you for, I just want to sort of be preparing everyone, would be significant for the year 24-25. With that being said, I'm open to any questions you all may have.
All right, thank you. Keith, any questions for Keith?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but I was thinking over the weekend when all the news hit about the hospital and the new name and all that good stuff, I think we ought to approach them again and see if they'd pay 25% of the nurse's cost. What do you think? That'd be a good deal, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir. Excuse me.
Anything else? Well, you know, I don't know if we thank you for telling us you're going to ask for a bunch of money in a couple of years, but I guess that's something to keep in mind for sure. If you don't mind, Keith, go back to the charter schools line. Can you highlight any comment about the negative change there?
Yes, that charter schools line, again, this is revenue received and represents that, or in the case of charter schools, actually the revenue they received that is, and of course you all know the way the charter school funding works locally is that whatever your allotment is to Burke County Public Schools, monthly, the charter schools send me an invoice, and we give them their per pupil local allotment out of county funds. The reason that's down is just simply a timing. The state of North Carolina changed the way charter schools invoice us this year and changed their invoicing from a 10-month to a 9-month schedule. So this threw us a month behind in comparison to the previous year's quarter. That will certainly come in line and will exceed the previous year. For instance, just New Dimensions alone, their invoicing to us went from 296 students the previous year to 423. So we're going to see that significantly increase this year. And New Dimensions is not the only charter school that Burke County Public Schools pays. We pay 2 virtual schools. We pay 3 out-of-county charter schools. So there's several.
All right, thank you, Keith. I knew I thought I heard enrollment was up in those schools, but then this number seemed odd, so I see now you got a timing matter here. Okay. Anything else? All right, Keith, thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Without objection, this item will remain on consent agenda. Let's bring this to item number 2. Also coming from schools, Keith, purchase of real property.
Yes, sir. I come to you seeking your authorization for the Burke County Board of Education and Administration to pursue the purchase of a parcel located at 240 Praley Street Northwest in Valdez. And as contained in your packet, there's a GIS map so you can see the location of that parcel in relation to our bus parking and pre-K drop-off area at Valdez Elementary School. And our specific purposes in acquiring this property would be to move the bus parking and visitor parking over to that parcel to allow more staging area and a safer area for pre-K pickup and drop-off.
All right, thank you, Keith. Any questions for Keith on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I did have a question on this one, and for the money, $250,000, I wondered how many parking spaces will that allow you?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
But I did miss in the presentation that it was going to be school bus parking instead of car parking.
There will be room for some car parking, of course. The primary purpose, you could see in the aerial map, the buses and where they're parked. And that back parking lot, which we have visitors and staff that park there, then we have our buses that park there. That's also our pre-kindergarten program drop-off and pickup, which a lot of folks park, walk their kids in, come in the evenings, walk in, bring their children out, or drive through as is customary for the older kids, some do, and it would create a much safer environment for that pre-K process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other question? All right, hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Item number 3 comes from Western Piedmont Community College, presentation of financial data for period ending September 30, 2021. This will be presented by Sandy Holman. Afternoon, Sandy.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to come today, and I want to echo what Dr. Welch said. We do appreciate what the county commissioners do for Western Piedmont Community College and for Burke County in general. Before I get into the first quarter, I am going to recap fiscal year 2021. For our state budget, we did have a total budget of $16,529,558 at the end of fiscal year 21, and we spent $16,115,354, 97%. And a good portion of what was remaining is carry forward, or was eligible for carry forward, either through our basic skills program, the GEAR scholarships, or our formula allotments that we're being able to carry forward. For our county funds, for the year, we spent $2,647,736 out of $2,667,110, or 99.3%. The carrying amount of $19,374 was already committed to an informal capital capital project that's already in progress, which was the addition of a handicap restroom in Patton Hall. So fiscal year 2021, I felt like we were able to do good. We handled the pandemic and came out ahead. So for the first quarter of fiscal year 2022 through September 30th, we'll look first at our state funds. And as Keith mentioned, we do not have a state budget yet. However, we have a baseline budget based upon fiscal year 2019, adjusted for any changes in enrollment. So for this year so far to date, we have our formula budget of $13,330,846 with additional allocations of $960,385 for a total state budget right now of $14,291,231. Through the first quarter, we spent $3,187,916, or 22.3% of the budget. And as we've mentioned before, this doesn't include any items that are encumbered. It is only actual items already expensed. The next three columns in blue represent the county budget and actual expenditures. Our current budget is $2,652,110 for operations, and we've received $658,103 of our budget, and we have spent $617,243 through the first quarter, utilizing 23.3% of our budget. The final three columns shows our institutional budget, and we have a budget of $9,702,370 for our institutional funds, which includes the categories as student financial aid, grants, self-supporting courses, and our bookstore. We'll also utilize a majority of our CARES Fund and American Recovery Plan grant funds this year, and as previously mentioned, most of the funds in our institutional are restricted in nature by their designation. Student aid and bookstore accounted for approximately 90% of the expenditures for the first quarter, as financial aid for the fall was processed in September, which is our largest semester. So as normal, and this is indicative of prior years, for state and county, we're a little bit less than 25%. For institutional, more so because of the fall semester. In the next slide, you'll see the total, the expenditure breakdown for county funds by category. And as you can see, salaries and benefits are at 24.6%, utilities at 24.2%, and contracted services at 15.6%. Again, the majority of that is where we outsource our custodial staff. You see insurance at 21.9%, but as a reminder, we pay most of our policies on an annual basis in the first quarter. So as we go throughout fiscal year 2022, that percentage will actually decrease as we have more expenditures to consider. That's our first quarter for fiscal year 2022. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy? Hearing none, we'll leave this item on the consent agenda. Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. Ed, come on back. TDA approval of bylaws. Thank you for being patient, Ed.
Oh, sure, no problem, no problem. Trying to skip the rules a little bit, didn't work, did it? So back in May the 18th of 2021, the Burke County Tourism Development Authority Board of Directors approved the minutes and the changes that we made. Basically, we had a subcommittee review our minutes and the minutes of other TDAs across North Carolina. There were no significant differences in our bylaws, of these bylaws of others. The additions that we did add, which mainly were additions to our bylaws, we added the kind of the paragraph section there on the front page about the General Assembly when we were created, what session it was, what House bill it was, and also the resolution from the Burke County Board of Commissioners on October 16, 2007 that actually created us. The other changes were done in an attendance policy, which we had previously but was not in our bylaws. Also, board member responsibilities on page, well, if you're looking at your packet, that's page 93, 94. And then we also added on page 95 the section 6 on closed session and how a TDA or any board can call a closed session and what that's meant for. Other than that, the bylaws remained as they were previously.
All right, thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed on the bylaws?
Mr. Chairman, I had a couple, I believe I saw in those that you're requesting a 3% increase in the occupancy rate tax.
No, that was not part of our, there's no, tell me where you saw that, and maybe I can address it, but I don't see that. This was just in the bylaws, so this was no,
Okay.
Ed, would it be possible to, for our, our package for the meeting, to maybe get with the clerk and highlight additions or changes?
sure. Yep.
Any other questions for me about it?
That was only the reference my question was on, so I'll strike it up.
Okay.
I'll revisit them.
All right, hearing no other question, this item will remain on consent agenda. Thank you, Ed. Item 5 comes from Burke County Emergency Communications Center, Viper Radio Memorandum of Understanding. And Brock, afternoon.
How are you doing, sir?
Good, hope you are.
Doing good. This is just an update of the existing Viper. This is just an update of the existing Viper radio agreement we have between the county itself and the agencies we serve. There's some changes on the state level for the Viper tenants, and that's going to come about in the next couple of years. So this document just brings those changes into compliance, or brings the document into compliance with those changes that are going to be happening. The high points are, it designates the 911 director as the Viper point of contact with the state, authorizes the point of contact or the emergency management director to deactivate radios as needed should it be determined that any agency or radio or operator is not in compliance with the Viper agreement or in violation of any of the state policies. It also dictates which radios we will program for other agencies, and it dictates the process for lost or stolen equipment so that it does not fall into the wrong hands, and how we will address that. And that's pretty much it, and I'll take any questions.
All right, thank you, Brock. Any questions for Brock on this item? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Brock.
Thank you.
Item number 6, Clerk, appointments to EMS Peer Review Committee. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Dr. Anthony Frank replaced Dr. Seth Hawkins as the medical director for Emergency Medical Services Department. Dr. Frank wishes to reduce the membership on the EMS Peer Review Committee from, give or take, 33 members down to 9. The proposed terms are for 2 years, and they would end on November 15th. And the proposed roster is as follows. Dr. Frank would be the physician with a 2-year term ending November 15th, 2023. Lenora Mahoney, the nurse representative, for a 1-year term ending 2022. Nicole Hudson, representing the EMS personnel, with a 2-year term ending 2023. April Traxler, representing the medical center at Fry Regional Hospital, for a 1-year term ending 2022. Mike Willis, representing emergency management, a 2-year term ending 2023. Commissioner Taylor as the governmental official for a 1-year term ending 2022. Brand Lingerfeld as the first responder representing the East for a 2-year term ending 2023. Alan Hudson, representing fire and first responder for the South for a term ending 2022, and Cassandra Reed, 911 Communications, 2-year term ending 2023. There are 2 ex officio positions slated. Jason Black, our EMS director, will be the moderator, and the recording secretary is to be determined once EMS hires their administrative professional. Be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on this item? Madam Clerk, is this a legislative committee, or are we good with just changing the numbers from 33 to 9?
It is, it's by administrative North Carolina code. I don't have that page in front of me, but it's in your packet. I'm not aware of any restrictions on changing the membership. Perhaps Nicole, who is here, maybe could speak to that a little more, but
This is or is not the same as the quality.
I believe that's the same. They just call them it something different
So
now.
this is the EMS Quality Assurance Committee. Is this the same, Nicole?
This is the same. The EMS Peer Review Committee is the same as the Quality Management Committee. This is the preferred name for the state. And there are no issues, no legislative issues that we need to approach or address. As long as we meet these 9 seats, it's at the sole discretion of the medical director, who or what attends.
Okay. Anybody else? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you. Item number 7, also from the clerk, appointments and removals to the Board of Health. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, gentlemen. Susan Bingham occupied seat number 7, registered nurse on the Board of Health until her recent resignation. We have received an application from Barry Nelson, VP of Nursing, Chief Nurse Executive at Blue Ridge Healthcare, and the unexpired term for this seat ends December 31st, 2023. We also received an application from Dr. Joel Welsh, WPCC President, for seat number 8, which represents an engineer. Dr. Welch is a licensed professional engineer in South Carolina, and for staggering purposes, we propose that that this seat have a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2022. So we would remove Susan Bingham and Sam King's name from the official roster and thank them for their service, and appoint Barry Nelson to seat 7 and appoint Dr. Welsh to seat number 8.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions for this item? Hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 8, also from the clerk, Council on Aging, appointments and removal. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The terms of appointments for seats 1, 2, 5, 7, 9, and 11 on the Council of Aging end November 30th. All members desire reappointment except for Ms. Ramsey and Mr. Mosley, and the terms are for 3 years, so we're asking to remove Kimberly Ramsey and Chuck Mosley's names from the roster and thank them for their service, and to reappoint Linda McGalliard, seat number 1, Eleanor Summers, seat number 2, Susan Janney, seat 7, and Mary Wright, seat 9, for 3-year terms ending November 30th, 2024.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any question on this item? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 9 comes from the county manager, resolution release of property, Avery Building. Mr. Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You have a group of state employees, juvenile officers that occupy office space on the first floor of the Avery Building, and this is just a renewal of that lease, and it is pretty much our big brother, the state, telling us you're going to do this, so we're just going through the motions.
All right, thank you, Brian. Any question on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I had a question here. Is $1 correct?
Oh, yes. You know, the state's broke. They can't afford to pay us anything. I think that is more a legal requirement to consummate a lease, but it's one of these where
But they do pay for the power and lights and...
Not that I'm aware of. They're serving the children of Burke County. We do, and it's just like all those probation officers that are over there in the county building there at the courthouse.
Why do we charge them $1 then? Legal?
Yeah, I think that's a requirement to make it a legal binding document. All kidding aside.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 10 comes from Community Development. Accept Friends of the Fontaflora State Trail Volunteer MOU. This comes from our Operations Manager, Shane. Afternoon.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Community Development Department is proposing a memorandum of understanding with the Friends of Fauna Flora State Trail to help us streamline volunteer efforts on county-maintained trails. Community Development and Parks and Recreation Departments have received numerous requests for volunteers to work on the Fauna Flora, MST Connector, and other trails managed by Burke County. Current county policy does not distinguish between different types of volunteers for different county programs. Every volunteer is covered under the county's workers' compensation plan and must complete a background check. Participation at a trail volunteer workdays can vary from event to event. This would make it impractical to obtain background checks from all the volunteers in advance of a workday. Either the county or the volunteers themselves would need to cover the cost of the background check. The barriers to volunteering are so great that it's likely that the county would not be able to attract and maintain volunteers to help keep our expanding trail networks maintained. The intent of the Memorandum of Understanding is to streamline the volunteering process, and working with the Friends of Fauna Flora State Trail, we'd be able to supplement the hard work of Parks and Recreation Department with periodic work days and keep the trails in prime condition. Thank you, gentlemen, and I'd entertain any questions you may have on this.
All right, thank you, Shane. Any questions on this matter? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you very much.
Item number 11 comes from Finance, approval of purchasing policy. Again, Ms. Margaret.
You have in your packet an updated purchasing policy to replace the one that was previously approved by the board in 1999. One of the requirements of the ARP funding is that we have a formally board-approved policy in place which identifies the uniform guidance that we follow in the event we receive federal funding. There's no changes within this policy from current day procedure. It simply codifies what we've been doing and adhering to for several years here in Burke, and it did add the language for the uniform guidance process. So this is something we need to have put in place before we spend any of our ARP money to, again, keep us out of federal hot water.
All right, thank you, Margaret. Any question on this item? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
on that one item, we are still looking back through it, and if you see any typos, please bring it to Margaret's attention so that we can put that in the final draft before it comes back before you.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to item 12, Tax Department Tax Collection Report for October 2021. I'll recognize our Tax Administrator, Danny Eisenhower. Afternoon, Danny.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Tax collection report for October 21. This covers the period July 1 through October 31. Property tax, we're at 73.05% collected. Motor vehicle tax, 37.89. Current year taxes, that's the two combined, is 69.41%. Delinquent taxes, 48.62. Late list penalty at 34.75. And then property tax, looking at it alone versus the levy at 71.3%, 0.03, excuse me.
And you've got those in front of you, gentlemen, stapled to your information. Any questions on that item? Hearing none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Item 13, Tax Department Release Refund Report for October 2021. Danny.
Okay, we had, on the tax system, we had the release report shows $9,015.29. Rebuild amount was $8,678.50 for a net release of $336.75. We had refunds in the amount of $1,068.60. Vehicle tax, the refund was $620.20.
Any questions on this report?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Danny, on your bill release report, you've got the original bill, the release amount, and then the bill amount after releases, and then you've got the rebuild amount. Should that third number not show the difference between the release amount and what they were billed?
What happens on these releases, and the reason I report it the way that I do, in our tax system, if there's a change on the bill, it releases the entire bill. So if there's a $1,000 bill, it releases everything, but maybe he still owes $800, so they're rebilling $800. So it gives you a net release of $200. That's the reason that I report it the way that I do.
So why is it different on your last entry item down at the bottom of the page?
Have them,
Now, that seems to be accurate to me, but
are you looking at this page right here?
Page 1 of 2,
Page 1 of 2, okay.
the address is Hankins Road. No, it's not the address, that's the, but it's the last.
If you're looking at the bottom of this page, what you're seeing is we have people that have the age exclusion, and so we release that whole bill. They may only be paying $400 on that bill, but since they no longer qualify for that age exclusion, their new bill is $800. So that's the reason you'll see that we released less than what we billed. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
Well, accurate numbers, if you go down to that large number, you got $11,077.49, that's fourth from the bottom, and you released it by that much. The bill after releasing is $0, and then you rebuild him $864.
That's correct.
Okay. And the question is there that, that math doesn't align.
That's where I'm saying that we have, because of the way the system's designed, we have to release the entire bill. And that one happened to be one of the age exclusions that was approved last month. We have to release the entire bill, and then we have to rebill what it's actually due.
Well, you show under your release amount, the $69.29, bill amount after release on all of them, I'm talking about the total now, is $535.83. So you'd have to do physical math to get the accurate number of how much.
Yeah, I have to look at more than one bill to get this actual number. I'll be glad to sit down with you and show you how it's done.
It just makes it more difficult to understand the numbers.
Yeah. I just try to portray them as they actually are.
Okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's.
Other question? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 14, Tax Department, late application for 2021 Veterans Exclusion. Dan?
Yes, sir. Last month, we had a couple late applications for the veterans exclusions, and we had a couple late applications for the age exclusion, so I've had a couple more this month. We have one for Jeremy Aaron Lewis and Yanni Chan Lewis for veterans exclusion, and then another age exclusion for Christy Edwards. Both of these applications, had they been received timely, would have been approved by the assessor. Budgetary effect on this, when you look at it together, it's $767.72.
All right, thank you, Danny. Gentlemen, you've got all the details there in front of you. Any question on either of these requests? Hearing none, we'll leave this item on consent agenda. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Item 15 was added to our agenda, clerk appointment to the planning board, and this application is in your printed package there, gentlemen. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to appoint Beth Hiley to the Burke County Planning Board for seat number 1, representing the East, to complete the remainder of a term ending September 30th, 2024.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any question on this item? Hearing none, this item will appear on the consent agenda at our regular meeting. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Then we have items for decision. First item is appointments removable to the Animal Advisory Board. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Gwen Stevens currently occupies seat number 1, representing a rescue or foster agency. But she was recently appointed to the Board of Health, and the Board of Health would like her to represent them on seat number 3, which was formerly held by Amy Burnett of Environmental Health until her resignation. So we want to move Gwen from seat number 1 to seat number 3. We don't currently have anybody for seat number 1, but we're actively combing the bushes. And then Gary McClure occupied seat number 7 until his recent resignation, and we have several applications on file for this seat, which is an at-large pet owner. And the unexpired term is July 31st, 2022.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Gentlemen, I would encourage you to take a look at those applications. Be sure we are ready at our meeting to nominate and deal with those. Any questions for Madam Clerk? Hearing none, this item will remain on items for decision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item number 2 comes from Finance, request for ARP Senior Fiscal Analyst position. Margaret, come on back down here.
I get my exercise today,
I say.
which is good. So as part of the ARP process, we are finding that it is going to be a significant amount of work involved. And one of the opportunities for funding is that it will fund a position to deal with the paperwork, the bidding, the management of projects, and all of the processes with it. We did, Rhonda and I did a significant amount of research to determine there are positions popping up all over the state related to this to try to come up with what would fit best here in Burke County. So what we have come up with is a senior fiscal analyst position at a pay grade of 29. This would be a time-limited position with all salary and benefits paid for by the grant funds. If at some point we see that the work doesn't fit, then we would reduce the position to continue to be funded by that position.
All right, thank you, Margaret. Any question on this item?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, please. Margaret, what's the total benefit package for pay grade 29?
It's going to depend on the salary, but assuming the base salary, you can count on roughly 30%, so that should be in the neighborhood benefits of about $21,000.
That's the total?
That's the free
Benefits. And those benefits are eligible for funding from the grant as well, the ARP funds.
Well, the thing that, couple of questions if you don't mind. How many employments in your department as it stands?
Within finance or all 6 departments?
Finance.
Finance has 6 positions.
6, including yourself?
No, sir, 7 including me.
These funds have limited areas where they can be spent, is that correct? The
Yes,
ARP?
sir.
I guess my question is, how does that get so hard to need some specialty person to sort through it and do the job?
One of the things that this funding requires of us is quarterly reports. The initial quarterly report for the period from May when we received the funds to the end of June was 15 pages to say that we spent nothing. So each quarterly report will take a significant amount of time to put together. Anything we utilize the funds for will require performance-based reporting, which means, for example, with the EMS equipment we purchased, we'll need to go back and track how many patients used it. Really good data will come out of this, showing how many patients used each piece of equipment, how many were related to potential pandemic illnesses, how many were other illnesses. A lot of data will be gathered. The HVAC units we'll be talking about. We've tried to determine what performance basis you might use for HVAC. I think it's going to be control of the temperatures. Air quality will have to be tracked with these. This reporting that they're going to require is significant, and that was why we felt we would need someone to help us. We also believe that general services, among other departments that receive funding, will need help coming up with bids, ensuring that everything's legally handled, processing the additional invoicing, and even the work, helping go out and manage the projects, because we're well aware that those departments are pushed to their max many times, and they need a little bit, because this is specialized projects, we'll need someone to help with it.
What is the uniqueness of Title II code that you mentioned in the presentation? That somebody has to understand the Title II code?
That is part of the Uniform Guidance Purchasing Laws for the federal government. You have to be able to adhere to all of those regulations. They involve ensuring that the bidding meets federal guidelines, that it could fall under the Minnie Brooks Act, which means it's a different level of funding. We won't be required to insure Davis-Bacon, which is a specialized kind of labor laws, but we will have to verify other labor laws are followed. Much of this was part of the original CARES Act funding we received last spring. However, that was money we had for 6 months. It was a challenge to maintain the reporting for it, and it was much simpler than this. It was no fun, but it was much simpler than this. We just are concerned that to do the right job for the county and ensure that everything stays on track, that we would need assistance.
And no one in your staff is qualified. I mean, usually when you're doing a program that's funded by, doesn't make any difference, state, federal, grants, whichever it is, it comes with this guidelines and what you can do, what you can't do, where you can't spend it. And here's the form you fill out. It comes ready to fill out. And I'm having a little difficulty understanding why we need a specialty bookkeeper, if that's a word, in that position when, and this is what the real crunch of it is, it's on me, it's on us. This board ultimately will decide how that money is spent, and who, which programs we want to participate in and which we don't. So I don't want to call it just routine follow-through instructions, but in your own words, why do we need to spend another $100,000 on an employee to, to accommodate these ARP programs?
So in the last 2 months, I've done just over 50 hours of training on this funding, just to get us started on it. Even without the final rules and all of the guidelines, we are spending that much time trying to even get a handle on what we know at this point. As we continue to go forward, that doesn't include overseeing any of the bidding or verifying it. There are probably people on my staff with these qualifications, but they're already doing all they can to keep up with the current work they have. There's no way for them to take on this project or this funding source as well. It is more than can be done, we feel like, done correctly with the staff we have. We don't want to make a mistake. We don't want something to fall through the cracks or not be bid appropriately, or a contractor not keep up with their work because we're torn in too many directions. We want to ensure that this is done to the best of our ability.
And do I understand from your presentation, this employee would be employed a minimum 4, possibly 6 years?
Yes, sir. It will fully depend on the funding. We have until December 31st of 2024 to either spend or obligate the funding. And obligate means, as according to the feds, it would need to be under contract, it would need to be planned out. Therefore, you're basically, everything will kind of be allocated by then, but you have up to 3 more years to finish those projects and finalize payment of those. So the funding that we'll be reporting on will be through December of 2026. Now, once, hopefully, you know, as our projects go and you see that 75% is done by December of 2024, this position would either drop back to being a 25% position, or we would be at a point where we could absorb it and do away with this position.
Well, I'm obviously not going to argue whether you need him or not. That's the reason I was asking the questions. But, gentlemen, it's not a $100,000 decision. It's a $5,600,000. And you need to know that. And I know we got.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Martin. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda, decision agenda. Item 7 on our agenda, gentlemen, is reports. Please submit any reports you have to the clerk for inclusion in our agenda packet. Gentlemen, we're considering February the 4th of 2022 as our annual budget retreat. Any conflict that you know of at this time with that date, and any concerns with needing more than one day? And I guess I'd look to staff maybe to help answer that question. If you know of anything, Margaret, do you know, I know we've discussed facilities report. Is that something that we might have available at that time to review, or is one day going to be enough, I guess? Maybe you guys need to give that some thought and give us some direction.
Well, I know that I spoke to Mosley's today. They should have this would be the right time for them to make their report to you. They'll be ready at this, and that is something that will take a little bit of time. Also, I believe will be, you had something else you mentioned earlier. Was it the pretrial information to talk further about at the retreat? We would want to go over what we feel like the budget drivers are coming up, whether it's construction projects we wouldn't need to know, because I know we've got several in the pipeline that by then we should know something about how you want us to proceed with the EMS base 1, potentially animal services building, the container site at Jonas Ridge and East Burke. So we have several large projects that we should know by then what direction, be able to give you information so you can determine what direction you'd like us to plan on.
I'm feeling like one day might not be enough. So why don't we look at your calendar, see if, that's a Friday, so see if Thursday and Friday, the 3rd and 4th looks okay, and you, staff, you guys give some thought as to how much time we really may need for all that, but let us know in the next while if you're going to have a conflict with those dates, okay?
Mr. Chairman, one other question. Do you all want to stay in county or go away somewhere?
Any thoughts, gentlemen? Whatever's most reasonable, I think, where we can find a space that's reasonable and that we can meet. Anybody got thoughts? Anybody not want to leave the county? Anybody opposed to it, if that's what?
I'm opposed to it.
You'd rather stay in county? Okay. All right, let's try to stay in county, Madam Clerk, then. Okay. Any other thoughts on a retreat? Okay. All right. Let me remind you that today's election day. Hope you perhaps have already voted, but if not, please please do that. The polls close at 7:30. I would remind you that the County Veterans Event is November the 10th. That'll be from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's kind of a drop-in event. You can drop by and see some veteran-oriented displays and pick up a lunch, I believe. County offices will be closed on November the 11th in observance of Veterans Day. Do keep in mind that that event is the day before Veterans Day on the 10th, not on Veterans Day itself, so please remember that. County offices will be closed on November the 11th in observance of Veterans Day and on November 25th and 26th for Thanksgiving. And then I would just alert you that our clerk will be attending the Master Clerks Academy in Chapel Hill, November 16th through 19th, which will be at the week of our regular meeting, and Lance will be substituting in for her at our meeting. So if you have needs or questions about the meeting on that week, just keep that in mind. Anything else that needs mentioning? All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. I believe that's all of us. Thank you very much.